I've been thinking, the world can be pretty dull and uninteresting sometimes.
You mean like right now when there's nothing to listen to or to look at or to read?
Yes, except for you and me, there's nothing to pay attention to or get interested in.
Well, maybe I can do something about it. For instance, look at that.
A clarinet film. Those are just words.
Yes, but words make life interesting. Words can tell the name of a film. Fun with words, from words to sentences. And they can tell about a person who helped to make the film.
Well, okay. The words were there all right, but I didn't see any sentences.
That's the next thing I was going to mention. Using words to make sentences. I'll start with words first, and then I'll work up to sentences.
You mean you'll talk about them?
No, I think I'll let you see for yourself by looking at an imaginary person at, at a Mr. Brown, I'll call him. A friendly, neighborly man who likes to tell stories. But imagine that when Mr. Brown tells his stories, he uses only naming words, the kind of words we call nouns.
Boy, dog, house, mother, father, toy. That's not much of a story. The words don't make sentences.
That's right. A string of nouns together by itself doesn't make much of a sentence. So let me set it up a different way. Mr. Brown can use nouns. And he can also use doing words, the action words we call verbs.
Boy runs, dog barks, girl sits, frog hops. These could be sentences.
Yes, a noun and a verb together can make a short sentence. Each pair of words is arranged so it makes sense. It's what we call a complete thought. Capital letters and periods are all we need to make them look like sentences.
Well, maybe they're sentences, but they don't tell much, and they're not very interesting.
Used by themselves, nouns and verbs don't make much of a story. But there are words that do add meaning to verbs and nouns. We'll call them modifiers. And maybe Mr. Brown can use some of them in his sentences.
Little boy has big balloon. Strong wind blows boy's balloon. Free balloon flies away. Little boy cries sadly. Those are better sentences, but he still needs a few kinds of words like a and the, once upon a time, things like that.
No sooner said than done. Now, watch Mr. Brown tell it.
Once upon a time, a little boy had a big red balloon. A big wind blew at the boy's balloon. The balloon flew away. It flew high in the sky. The little boy cried sadly. Hey, that makes a better story.
Yes, the nouns, verbs, modifiers, and other words all went together to make sentences.
But there was a lot to read. From now on, can't we hear Mr. Brown?
All right. I'll give him a voice so that he can tell you the stories himself.
There once was a train full of toys.
And I'll set it up so we actually see the stories as he tells them.
The train had to go over a big mountain. Over the mountain was a town. The toys on the train were for boys and girls in the town. The engine of the train broke down. A big new engine came by. The broken engine asked for help. The big new engine said, no. An old, dirty engine came by. The broken engine asked for help. The old, dirty engine said, no. Then a happy little engine came by. It looked too little to pull the train. It pulled the train, though. It pulled it over the mountain. The boys and girls of the town got their toys.
How's that?
Well, it was all right. But there was something I noticed about the sentences.
Let me show you one. There. The broken engine asked for help. Now, what did you notice?
That it's short, and it has one idea in it. It has one naming word and one doing word.
That's true. The sentence has only one noun and one verb. Most of the sentences in the story are like that. And most of them tell what things do. The broken engine asked for help. That was what it did. Understand?
I think so. And I was wondering, can you put some short sentences together so they make longer ones?
Of course. Now listen, and I'll have Mr. Brown tell another story. And this time, he'll combine some of his shorter sentences into longer ones.
There once was a giant lumberman named Paul Bunyan, and he lived in the North Woods.
See? The idea that there was a man and the place where he lived. Two ideas combined in one sentence.
His helper was a giant blue ox. One day, a lumberman complained to Paul. There was trouble down at the river, and Paul went to look. It was a log jam. The river was crooked, and the logs could not float downstream. So Paul Bunyan caught two blizzards at the North Pole, and they blew on the river and froze it. Then he and his ox pulled on the frozen river, and they straightened it. From then on, the river was straight, and the logs floated downstream.
You see how Mr. Brown combined short sentences to make longer ones?
Can I see one of those sentences?
Of course. The river was crooked, and the logs could not float downstream. What do you think?
It seems more grown up, the way it combines two ideas. One about the shape of the river, and the other about where the logs could float.
And another reason why sentences in this story are interesting is that they have words in them to tell what things look like. The river was crooked. That was what it looked like. And the logs could not float downstream. The crooked look of the river explains why. So now you've seen Mr. Brown use two different kinds of sentences. But they're not the only kinds. For instance, there's a combined sentence with two thoughts. But one thought is more important than the other. Watch for it in this story.
Once there was a very little boy. Because he was as small as a man's thumb, they called him Tom Thumb. Even when he grew a little bigger, Tom always got into trouble. Though he loved his parents, Tom left home. After many adventures, he was swallowed by a fish. When he came out, he found himself in King Arthur's court. He wanted to be a knight. One day, Tom saw a spider stealing the king's gold. Though he was not as strong as the spider, he fought bravely. He won, and the king made him a knight. Though Tom Thumb was very small, he was very brave.
Do you see what I mean about those sentences?
I'm not sure.
Well, let me show you one. You see, there are two ideas combined. First, the idea that he loved his parents, and then the idea that Tom left home. But the word though makes one idea sound less important than the other. Though he loved his parents, that sounds less important. Tom left home, That sounds more important. And another thing about the words in this sentence, they tell how people feel. Though he loved his parents, that's how he felt about them, Tom left home. Do you understand?
I think I do.
And do you understand what I was talking to you about a little while ago?
You mean that words make life so much more interesting by telling us things?
That's right, words.
Like those? The words tell us that it's the end of a film.
Yes, but that doesn't mean that we're going to stop thinking about words and sentences.
I guess not. You say I can start with nouns and verbs and work up the sentences. Well, how am I going to use nouns and verbs in the story about my